So, hello, you've just joined me and Amanda talking about those things that always people talk about when they meet, when they haven't seen each other for a while, especially over lockdown. When did we first meet? Because that's always a kind of a fluid thing. But I've known Amanda for a while now, a good long while, and I've always admired her work. And so when I had a chance to ask her to do the Christmas lecture, I obviously shamelessly asked Amanda, mainly because I just wanted to hear more about her work. So what is the Christmas lecture with the House of the West Wind? The House of the West Wind is a virtual college at the moment. In the future, we hope to have an actual college, but at the moment, we rent buildings and we run amazing courses. And I suppose our brief is to give a voice to storytellers, to create spaces where people can ask questions, where you get to see unusual and different things that you maybe wouldn't normally get a chance to see within your own sphere of the storytellers you mix with, the creatives you mix with, all of those things. And that's kind of what House of the West Wind is. It's also a place for me to put my Thritzilla tradition and run the courses that I run to pass on these traditional techniques. And in the future, just to wind that up, we're hoping that other people will come and lecture at House of the West Wind as well. We do a Christmas lecture and we do a midsummer lecture. And our midsummer lecture will be with Peter Chand, but we'll talk more about that later. So, Amanda, first of all, thank you so much for just being here.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's always lovely to chat to you. You know, it's and I was thrilled when you asked me to do the Christmas lecture. I couldn't be happier about it.
Oh, great stuff. Well, I'm going to ask you the sort of question that I always get asked first. You know, this is my chance to kind of. So one of the questions I always get asked first is, what's your favourite story? But I'm going to ask you, what's your favourite plant and why?
Oh, that's a good one. And I actually opened the last workshop I did with that very question. We got people to introduce themselves. I was doing a session in the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh with Lisa Schnedow, who I know you also know. And Lisa and I, instead of getting people to introduce themselves, got them to just say what plant they they related to, a plant that really resonated with them. And it's incredibly difficult because I am basically a crazy plant lady. I really like plants. Favorite plant. Hawthorn trees are really high up my list. I associate them enormously with my maternal grandmother, and quite a lot of my interest in plants was sort of stems from walking around gardens, talking about plants and how they were used with my gran. St. John's wort is one that I feel just makes me incredibly happy and has restored balance for me personally when I've been a bit blue and down or had a really tough part of life. It's a great wound healer as well. And I'm super fond of nettles. Do love a nettle. Oh, do you know what? Like, we live in this society where we get fancy superfoods from around the world, chia seeds and things, quinoa from the Amazon and these sort of things, and they're sold. And I'm left going, and at the same time, people will be in a supermarket spending a fortune on imported South American chia seeds and taking a strimmer to a nettle at the bottom of the garden. And the irony is that those nettle seeds have got loads of the medicinal properties that we go and purchase at massive premiums in supermarkets. And I'm left going, what's happened to society where we do that?
Do you think, as we've moved further away from the way our ancestors worked, as we've moved further and got more sophisticated, that we've forgotten all that wisdom and we see things now as just ordinary. We fail to see the extraordinary in the very world that surrounds us. We see it as just ordinary. So actually that brings me, I'm going to ask you to answer that and seamlessly, because I know storytellers can talk, ask you, how have your ancestors influenced you? So two questions.
Well, my gran had an interesting background. Her father, my great granddad, was English Romany. I think the family story goes that his mother found herself alone with two boys and eventually in the workhouse somewhere at the beginning of the 20th century, just before end of the 19th century, and that he decided he'd go and get a job, and at 14 started being a farm labourer and earned enough money to buy a bit of land, and the farm grew from there. He had a fruit farm, well, mixed farm, as was the time in those was the way. But my mum has great memories of being up cherry trees and you know, and I remember my great granddad showing me around the farm and pointing out plants and animals and things. So my gran was a fantastic cook and an amazing gardener, but anywhere you went she would tell you things about plants. My mum, as you know, Jean Edmiston, is a brilliant storyteller. She's been a professional storyteller for about 35 years now, and so but in turn, really, a lot of the storytelling stems from my maternal grandfather, who, although he was a sculptor, my gran met him when he was down in the Second World War, stationed near Bristol, I think, and she was nursing, and he was from Scotland. But my granddad, the whole time he was carving or working in his workshop, would tell stories. And anywhere we went, the land was populated by stories. You know, there were every tree, every bit of wood, every stone had a tale to tell, and that was the way he'd learnt. It's kind of informed his work. You know, stories were really there, if not as storytelling, but everything our family does seems to be informed by stories. So it's probably not a surprise, you know, that my mum became a storyteller. I feel like you can see a thread going back through history of plants and stories. And so, yeah, I guess that's how my mum, when I first started, I felt like I'd been looking for something that was missing for a long time, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I was quite grown up by that point. And I just, as soon as I started to tell stories, but especially stories about plants, I just felt like I'd come home, and I knew that this is what I should have been doing all along.
Yeah, I think when you finally find that thing that resonates, that I call it the third string, you know, as a musician, when you play two strings together and you get that third resonance. And I think it's a bit like that when you as a person find the thing that is your soul food, if you like. You get that third resonance and you just know that that's what you're going to be doing. And kind of talking about that, you're quite sensory in the way you tell, aren't you?
Very much so. I mean, from very rarely does any group I'm working with, from, you know, if I'm in a school or even, you know, museums, botanic gardens, anywhere, universities, I've got them all. I usually have them all with a cup of herbal tea, and but I'm such a geek about this that it has to be the tea that's in the story. And the stories I tell have the use of the plant sort of symbolically woven into the story. I make up my own fragrances, if you like, using again the plants from the story. So there's no you know, there's no chemical fragrance in there, but then I infuse. So if I'm in a theatre or a performance space where that's viable, I'll infuse the space with the scent of the plants to bring the outside in. I've got, I mean, literally everything. She says, reaching over into the basket of goodies. I think I've got. Oh, it's not in there. These things are never where you want them to be, are they?
No,
I've got
they're
cloths
tricksters.
of. They are totally cloths of nettles, made of nettle fabric that I use to cover tables. I mean, I'm a little bit obsessive, shall we say? I can't a teeny bit. I just enjoy it. It's what really like resonates with me. It's that, as you say, it's that heart song. It's that feeling that this is what it's got to be. And I think it makes it quite magical for people. Some people get words. Some people need visuals. Some people don't realise that it's sense and taste that triggers something, that connects them. And so if it's all there, it speaks to all the people.
Absolutely. I mean, in the tradition that I'm from, you're taught to remember a story with every sense that you have, because that's how we walk through the world. And I don't know if you've had this, when you're working with stories, sometimes you go, okay, describe that scene to me. And people describe, but they just use sight. They very rarely use smell or taste or touch. And so, yeah, we do very much relate to the world through our senses. We're sensual beings, if you like. And so I'm going to ask you, because I just get the impression we could talk all morning, a little bit about what you're going to do on the Christmas lecture. But if you could incorporate that with, obviously, we all want to be drinking some tonic wine while you do this lecture. So maybe you could take us through that process as well.
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. So as I say, one of the things I like to do is I like to get people tasting and smelling the plants in the story so that they kind of come to life. And I think, seeing as it's evening and it's the 29th of December, I feel like a little wine is definitely allowed. But this is a recipe that actually, I think I've got the book here. I first discovered, I didn't try it. I found an alternative way, but in the very first herbal I ever got, which is by the Concise Herbal Encyclopedia by Donald Law, that my mum bought me. I think I was about 6, really. I had my own bit of garden and I was fascinated by plants. Donald Law is quite it's an old-fashioned style herbal, so there's all kinds of folkloric notes, there's recipes, all sorts. It's a fab book. I then found the recipe again when I was studying herbal medicine, and I worked with a wonderful herbalist who we've lost, unfortunately. He's died and passed on, Christopher Headley, who I know anyone that interested in plants will know Christopher's name because he was amazing. He also did a version of this recipe, and I've looked back at it again a lot more recently, not only because it crops up in my grand's recipe book that I have had, that's been passed on now for several generations. It was my great grandma's and my grand's, but because I'm gonna, shameless plug time, I've just finished a manuscript for my first book, Time Traveller's Herbal, and it's out and Samhain next year. And I thought I'm going to revisit this because it's a fabulous way of getting iron back into the diet. We suffer from a lot of industrial farming problems where food is lacking in essential minerals and vitamins, and alcohol, if used carefully, is a fantastic way of extracting quite a lot of elements out of the plant. This is not meant to be taken like a medicine, like a prescribed tincture, anything that you took for a serious medical condition. Don't take the word of a storyteller online. Go find a properly qualified medicinal herbalist. People need telling. It sounds daft, but they do. I'm not sure any of our audience will need that knowledge, but this is something you can safely take. I think Chris Headley always said take a tiny sherry glass full every evening. Now it needs a 10 days, 12 days to infuse for the extract process to take place. So if you make it this week, we should be ready by the Christmas lecture. And what you need is a jam jar. So clean, sterilized, very basically sterilized. It's for me and my family, so you know we won't get that many bugs, but I have put boiling water through it. Then what you need next is sultanas in this case. Yeah, because they're full of dried fruit are fantastic for minerals, really rich in iron. And so what we do is we pour our sultanas or our raisins, currants from Corinth. I feel like I love the thought of currants from Corinth. In fact, actually, the picture I've got in the background is one of my story boxes, one of the first I made, and in it it's a story of plants being brought from around the world and all coming back at Christmas for a baby being born in Scotland. And currants from Corinth are one of the first plants that gets gathered. You're getting a real taste of one of my sessions.
Are you just like doing a handful of each of these?
Do you know what? My editor has already said a lot of your recipes are a handful of this and some of that. And I'm like, I think a little bit like our knowledge of the everyday plants in the garden. I think we are so reliant on a written recipe these days or a TV chef that we have this massively measured way of working that actually totally overrides your instincts. And a lot of people have incredibly good instincts. I worked with children recently and said to them, it's a slightly adjunct example, but I said, do you know which way north is? And they were mostly rural kids, and they all looked up and they had a look around, and one boy went, yeah, it's over there. And I went, how do you know? And he went, I just know. And 2 or 3 of them had to think, and they all went, actually, he's right. And I looked it up on compass and everything, and absolutely spot on. Now, we get told so often as adults to double check, to reference, to measure, to make it precise. Brilliant value if you're building a bridge and you're an engineer. If you're making a cake, a little bit of love and a little bit of common sense and a little bit of instinct will also work. I'm going to go with, because this can vary depending on how big your jar is and how much you like raisins.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't want raisins, we ended up with a foot of snow outside this morning. So I'm changing my ingredients. I'm adapting a bit. I would usually use half raisin, half sultanas, and I use half apricots. But you could use all apricots, or you could use pretty much any dried fruit. Try and get one that isn't sulfur hasn't been used in the processing, or that isn't covered in sugar or anything like that. So just basically a dried fruit to about a third of the way up the jar. And then on top of that, we're going to put in, now I've put in the recipe, nettles, my favorite nettles. And I'm very, very aware that unless you already sort of operate in the fields I do, that I've got spaniel helping, by the way, just in case.
Yeah, I know. I was just looking at my garden thinking, where are the nettles?
Well, don't use them at the moment because you probably do have some, but we use nettles from the spring. So the first third of the year, well, no, maybe not third, up until probably, certainly in Scotland, mid-April. But those first shoots, when they come through, and the top leaves, because if you've still got some in the garden at this time of year, they've been around for a while, and they start to get quite high in silicates, and that can be quite taxing for the kidneys. And if you've got any underlying kidney conditions, they can be quite problematic. Spring nettles, incredibly safe. if you want to try this and buy them, you can find ethically sourced nettles for a couple of pounds that have been gathered in the UK from a decent herbal supply shop. And I can give anyone that wants details a couple of good choices of people that you can reliably get them from.
Links later, that would be great.
Yeah, no worries. So but if you don't have nettles, it makes a delicious tonic wine without them. The nettles are just really, really super high in minerals. They're a traditional cure for anemia. They're very energizing. I know a lot of people that would say we use a lot of ginseng or chia, as I mentioned before, when actually we've got the homegrown nettle, and they're what herbalists call adaptogenic. They help your body cope with stresses. And they're also great for allergies. So you know the story of the girl who weaves the nettle shirts for her brothers whilst not speaking to rescue them from an enchantment. I always say, that's why I get my nettle fabric out. But that the reason, two things. One, if you're allergic to anything, say swan feathers, that nettles would help your body cope with the allergy. And the other factor is that if you ate nettle seeds, which you can gather at the end of the year, not the leaves, just the seeds, that they're really energizing. So if you were going to weave and spin and weave nettles, 7 shirts without speaking, nettle seeds would be your friend. They'd give you the energy to do so. So you don't have to use the nettles, but they are absolutely fab. If ever friends have children, babies are born, they're one of the things that helps you cope with getting better after childbirth, because we get anemic. So any kind of great nutrient for women generally, actually, anything to do with blood loss and childbirth and all those sort of things, nettles are your friend. So next, the noises. I'm grating some citrus rind. Also popped down in the Facebook page that rosehips are great, but you can still pick rosehips now. They're fantastic after the first frost and snow, but I'm not getting up my garden to get mine. So I've gone with the other alternative, which is citrus peel. So just a bit of citrus peel.
Yeah, got it.
Into the jar with the nettles and the sultanas. Vitamin C helps your body process iron. So you don't take anything with iron, like a tonic wine or nettles, with a cup of tea or coffee, because they block the uptake of iron. Next, we've got star anise, because we're doing a Christmas lecture, and we're into the plants that are associated with renewal. But star anise is fantastic because it's a great immune booster. My mum absolutely swears by 1 star of star anise in a cup of tea several times a day for helping us fend off flu and cold and things. And there is scientific evidence to prove that one. So I'm breaking up some star anise. We're popping that in. And cinnamon. Tell you the story in the Christmas lecture of the phoenix, but it uses cinnamon in its nest, and it's got that, along with the raisins and the orange, cinnamon, it's already starting to smell quite festive. But also, as we come into this time of year where we all overindulge a wee bit, cinnamon helps your body balance blood sugar. So, get away with slightly more chocolate. Now, what you need to do at this point, I know what else I'm adding. Now, you can add store cupboard ingredients. So a few black peppercorns. Black peppercorns, great, because they help your body. The the circulation system open up. They start opening the body up and allowing things to get through. But also, I quite like that sort of hot spice. We've got
someone on from Sweden who says it's been a crazy year for rosehips.
It has actually, Karen. Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. I do a lot of intergenerational work. I find that people's family memories of how plants were used are a really fantastic, great resource and brilliant for helping people connect to the natural environment. And one of the things in Scotland that everybody remembers about rosehips is that they used to gather them and take the itchy seed covering out. There's kind of sort of thin filamenty fibers inside, and use it as itching powder. That's great. I create plant riots sometimes. Anyway, so but so you still got some rosehips out there, Karen. This is great for this. So you've got a jar, not quite full to the top, with about 2 tablespoons of nettles. We've got about a third of the jar filled with sultanas. We've got star anise, black pepper and cinnamon, and a bit of grated citrus peel, and some wine. And then you pour that over there. Anyone that's got really good colour vision is going, that wine's a funny colour. I'm on a double infusion with mine, which means this wine has been taken off one that I made 10 days ago to double infuse it. Strained off the plant material and I'm adding it again. So that, what you need to ensure you do at this point is cover all the plant material. And once you've covered it up to the top, making sure that it's all covered up, because then you're stopping the air getting to the plants. Give it a good old shake and put it somewhere on a window ledge or, you know, in the kitchen. Mark it, because one of my greatest problems is making things and then having to sniff them and taste them and try and remember what it was I made.
Should you not put it in sunlight, or is that okay?
Sunlight's ideal, but I don't know about you, but we haven't got a lot. A warm kitchen windowsill is not bad. And just because I'm on full Blue Peter mode, I have got another jar. This one had sultanas, nettles, cinnamon, star anise, juniper berries, and I thought I would try a non-alcoholic one just before this. Can I have my glamorous assistant, please, to come and help open a jar? Thank you very much. My glamorous assistant is quite strong, usually.
Your glamorous assistant is struggling.
Okay. So what you do when you've opened it up, I've used elderberry juice in that one instead of wine. It doesn't extract as much of the properties as the wine, but it has that immune boosting effect, and it's a beautiful purple color. You know, you could pretty much put the ingredients in small quantities in a teapot and just have it as a tea. So you would add nettle, a few raisins, some cinnamon, star anise, and a bit of citrus peel. Put boiling water over it and let it sit for 5 minutes. You know, it wouldn't keep like the alcoholic version would. You'd have to drink it on the spot, but the taste will be there. The lid really has tightly shut. That's fine. No worries. I have a backup plan. A woman with many preparations of tonic wine on the go. They'll all be put to good use. Yeah. Eventually you get a sort of browny, greeny coloured liquid. Don't be put off by the colour. There are preparations, I'm not going to mention what, you know, brand names, but you will easily go into a supermarket or chemist and find things that are pretty much based on traditional tonic wine recipes as iron supplements or vitamin supplements, full of herbs. So they have that, it has that same kind of browny colour, That's a combination of the nettles in the wine. And a cupful a day. I'm not sure, it's a bit early in the morning, but it smells beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So sultanas, nettles, a bit of orange peel, cinnamon, star anise and black pepper, covered up with wine, and leave it for a couple of weeks. Open it up and I'll tell you a few stories about it when we meet up on the 29th.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Amanda, and your glamorous assistant. And I really look forward to that. I'm going to go and make a list of ingredients straight away so that I can be supping a tonic wine as we speak. Remind me to tell you about my grandmother's bagel recipe, very much about not measuring. And we will see you. And if you haven't already got your tickets for Amanda's amazing Christmas lecture, please go. It's on my website at the moment. And get your tickets for House of the West Wind Christmas lecture on the 29th of January. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Shonaleigh, and I really look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
Indeed.